few things. But the gentleman who's going to be speaking to us tonight, though, you know, I printed up some stuff in the newsletter that went out about him, but I'm not going to cover that except to say that he kind of fibbed a little bit when he sent me some information on himself, and he said that he was an amateur. Without further ado, Bobadella.
So tonight, what we're going to talk about is flutes, whistles, and ocarinas. We'll get into a little bit of theory about them. We'll get into a little bit of the construction techniques that are available. A little bit of what we're going to talk about is different types of aerophones. If you've ever blown across a Coke bottle, you've essentially played what's known as a vessel flute, or a Helmholtz resonator. A more sophisticated form of that is the ocarina, which essentially means it's a closed vessel. It has an edge, and there are some holes for tuning. Before recorded history, playing around with pieces of reed, cane, whatever, bones, whatever they had, and they discovered that they could get noises out of it. To get a noise out of a column of air, you have to get it moving. There's a couple of ways of getting it moving. An edge tone is the most common, and that's what we're using in all of the instruments here. That means when the air hits the edge, a sharp edge, it begins a vibration. All by itself it would sound like a white noise. For example, each of these flutes is a different key, and the shorter ones produce higher tones. That's the lowest note that flute will produce. And that's the lowest note that will produce. This was a project where I needed a name tag for a turning club, and I had to turn something, so I made an ocarina. It's not a particularly good ocarina, but it does play. When the Native Americans first started developing flutes in this country, skipping off the Anasazi, when we get to something resembling these flutes, what's called a Native American flute, this instrument actually only dates back to about 1850s. So it's not nearly as old as some people would like you to believe. And the interior design resembles an organ too. Let me talk a little bit about the design of what we fondly call the Native American flute. It generally is a two-chamber instrument. The sound is produced in this long tube. This is essentially a flute cut in half down the middle. So the holes would be up on top here. This is the sound chamber. It's producing the noise. This is what's called the slow air chamber. It offers the air a chance to settle and smooth out when you blow. When you play an instrument like this, you have to be the slow air chamber. So it takes a little bit more effort for the player to get a smooth, even breath. A 6-hole instrument doesn't need to be 6 holes. You could get essentially the same range on 4 holes. You wouldn't get all of the notes along the way, but you could get the same range. The 6 holes give you flexibility in your fingering, and it gives you a little bit more ability to pick up the notes that aren't included in a pentatonic scale. A lot more than 5 notes. The sequence of events for me to build a flute starts with a stick of wood, preferably longer than this. This is only 18 inches long. I like to start with a single block of wood because I split my blanks and wrap them. Don't have the drilling equipment. Now what I've done in this blank is I've routed out the sound chamber, and with a smaller router bit, routed out the blowhole, and then I drilled a hole to connect it on the top. All of these passages need to be smooth. You might not be able to see it from back there. There's a shallow channel here that runs about 34 thousandths at the top end to about 3 thousandths down at the bottom end. Having done the preliminary shaping, I'm ready to glue this up. I'm still using polyurethane glue for most of mine. A lot of flute makers have started migrating to Type Bond 3. It's not quite up to the same standard as the polyurethane, but it's less demanding. And I figured one of my customers is going to leave this thing in a car, and it's going to cook. And after somebody's played it for a while, it's soggy inside with all the vapors from them blowing. You start putting those combinations together, there's a good chance it's going to rupture. And since I sell my flutes with a lifetime guarantee of satisfaction, I don't want it coming apart and coming back to me. That's my lifetime.